I tested all these wheels to find the best Chinese wheels and the best wheels from the West, and today we're going to put them head to head. So today, representing the West, we have the Roval Rapide CLX2s. These CLXs have won more races than any other wheels in the pro peloton, and today they're going up against the best from China, the CRW5060s. Now these wheels don't have the Palmares of the Rovals, but these things are more than 200 grams lighter and more than $1,000 cheaper. So let's see, how do the best in the West stack up against the best in China? We're going to be comparing the weight, the stiffness, the aerodynamics, and the ride qualities of both these wheels using science to see which wheel is the best. Now, as a bit of context, I am no engineer, but I am a bit of a wheel nerd. As you can see, this is a bit of my collection of wheels. I have more than 20 pairs as well on my bikes. So yeah, today I'm just going to share my thoughts on these two pairs of wheels. Now, this is going to be super in-depth and super nerdy, but I think it's necessary to define which wheel set you should spend your hard-earned money on. So yeah, let's go check it out. Now, as I said in the intro, this is going to be a super in-depth, nerdy analysis. So if you are more into your reading than you're watching, I made an article version of this, which is over on the website. I'll put a link in the description down below. But if you just want to chill and take in information and don't like to read, then this video is for you. If you do want to skip through the video, on the time bar below, you can kind of skip through to different sections. I've put different sections in there so you can just skip to the bit you want. Full disclosure, CRW gave me their wheels for free, but the Rovals I bought with my own money. There's actually a disclaimers and background section in the video as well, so if you want the full disclaimer, make sure you watch that bit as well. So yeah, the first point is just to reiterate, what do I mean when I say the best? So yeah, the best Western wheels, the Rovals, I think they're pretty well critically acclaimed. You can go read any reviews you like as well, but yeah, most people are a fan of these wheels. As I said in the intro, the CLX wheels have won more races than any other wheel set in the pro peloton, I believe, so that's obviously a good sign as well. And then for the CRWs, again, what's the best Chinese wheel? I just went for our best selling Chinese wheel. So yeah, what you mean by the best can vary, but both of these wheels are very, very good wheel sets. And I think it's fair to say they kind of represent the best of the West and the best of China. So it makes sense for them to go head to head. Now, the first thing we'll compare on these two is probably the easiest thing to compare is the weights. So yeah, I just took the wheels with tubeless tape, but without the valves. That's how I weighed them. So if we start with the Roval Rapides, their claimed weight is 1,520 grams for a pair. My front wheel clocked in at 700 grams on the dot. The rear wheel clocked in at 821.5 grams, which gives us 1,521.5 grams. So just 1.5 grams over the claimed weight. The CRWs, on the other hand, they have a claimed weight of 1,290 grams. My front wheel was 600 grams on the dot, so exactly 100 grams lighter than the Rovals. And the rear wheel was 708 grams, so 113.5 grams lighter than the Roval rear wheel. And that puts the weight for a pair of CRWs at 1,308 grams, which is 18 grams over the official weight. But as a percentage, I think that's like 2% or whatever. That puts the total difference in weight between the Rovals and the CRWs at 213.5 grams. Now, again, Rodis, we're pretty weight obsessed. Is 200 grams a lot? You guys be the judge. Because it's rotating weight, it does make a difference when you're accelerating, but obviously weight is weight, so the place you're going to feel it most is on the climbs. So yeah, when you're climbing, you're fighting gravity, so any weight you can get less is always going to be a good thing. Now, the Rovals are not heavy wheels, like 1,520 grams for a 50-60 mil deep wheel set. Like, that's all right, that's not a bad weight. It's just that the CRWs are crazy light and then puts the whole thing in a different kind of perspective. So yeah. Now, the next thing I compared about the two wheels was the lateral stiffness. So I have a little rig set up here where I can test the stiffness of the wheels. Basically, front and rear wheel, I bolt it to my rig. I use a set torque every time, torque it down with a torque meter. While it's on there, I also measure the run out of the wheel and the flatness and all that stuff. But basically, I then apply a force to the rim and see how much the rim deflects. I do this on several points around the rim and then flip it over to the other side and do the other side as well. Front wheel, rear wheel, done. Now, I need to preface this by saying two things. Number one, lateral stiffness isn't the only stiffness. So obviously you've got torsional stiffness as well, which will, I guess, more in line with how the wheel transfers power. Whereas lateral stiffness is more like when you're when you're out the saddle giving it the beans, or when you're really hitting a corner, how stiff the wheel is there. So bear that in mind. Measuring torsional stiffness is pretty hard, especially with my limited setup. So lateral stiffness is all we've got. The second thing I want to say is, just like bike frames, stiffer is not necessarily better. It's going to depend on the kind of riding you do and all that stuff. So I'll put the full chart on screen so you guys can just look over that while I am talking. But yeah, basically front wheel and rear wheel, the drive side and the non-drive side of each. So one impressive thing about the Rovals is just how even the stiffness is. So if you look at the drive side and the non-drive side, they're pretty close to each other. Whereas the CRWs, the drive side and the non-drive side, you've got some pretty big variations going on. And one thing that's helping the Rovals there is it's 2-to-1 spoke lacing. So maybe we'll talk about this later, but there are pros and cons of doing 2-to-1 spoke lacing. But one of the pros is that you can get a more even distribution of your spoke tension and a more even balance of the lateral stiffness of the two sides of the wheel. This is one thing that like disc brakes kind of messed up for everyone. So a front wheel and a rim brake used to be great, like the two sides of spokes were symmetrical, but now you've got the disc rotor in there, so the front wheel has one side with different angle to the other. And also the rear wheel has always been the same. One side you've got the cassette and the other side you've got the disc rotor, but again, different angle on the spokes. So if you put the same amount of tension in all of the spokes, the wheel's not going to be balanced properly because these spokes are pulling more at an angle compared to these spokes. So one reason to use 2-to-1 spoke lacing is to kind of offset this problem. So like I said, very impressive that the Rovals managed to keep the stiffness on both sides as even as they do. Like I say, the CRW is not as even. In theory, in that case, when you're turning left and you're turning right, you're getting a slightly different experience. Not something I've ever noticed when I'm out on the road, but the numbers don't lie. It is what it is. But yeah, just another surprising find was just that overall the Rovals are actually stiffer than the CRWs. Now, okay, at first glance you might think, okay, they've got 200 grams more weight. Of course, they're going to be stiffer. But the CRWs have carbon spokes, and usually carbon spokes give you a huge advantage when it comes to stiffness, just because those spokes don't stretch. So when you do apply the load to the wheel, there's going to be less flex. But yeah, so the Rovals get higher stiffness. So yeah, the front wheels are pretty much the same kind of lateral stiffness on them both. But on the Rovals, the rear wheel, the lateral stiffness is quite a bit higher. Now, do you need more lateral stiffness on the rear wheel than the front, or is it just a side effect of Roval trying to put more torsional stiffness in the rear wheel? I'm not sure. But yeah, the numbers don't lie. Very impressive lateral stiffness from the Rovals. But if we add up all of the stiffness values, the averages come out, the CRWs 44.89 and the Rovals 56.26. So like 15-20% stiffer on the Rovals. Yeah, pretty impressive. And again, I'm trying to keep this as objective as possible and not be subjective, but like I say, this is a whole can of worms of whether or not stiffer is better. One thing that people do say about the CRWs is that they ride nice, they're comfortable to ride, and that may very well be related to this, because in general, more stiffness is less comfort. But again, that's generalizing, bit of a rabbit hole. Okay, so the next area to compare these two wheels was the aero testing. Now, I guess this is kind of like the meat of the review because, aero is everything, as some people say. And it's no use having the lightest, stiffest wheels in the world if they go slow through the air. So, for this aero testing, I used the Ghibli Aero sensor. I've got a full video on that coming soon, so subscribe so you don't miss out when that comes out. But basically, the Ghibli Aero sensor, it sits underneath the GPS head unit of your bike and can read what's going on with the air pressure, the wind direction, the wind speed, all of this stuff. So the results of the testing isn't going to be upset or affected by the wind. So if I throw over to the video I shot at the scene, I'll give you a bit of a walkthrough of the setup we had for the testing. Okay, so let's have a look what's going on. We've got the Rovals, we've got the CRWs on the bike right now. Exactly the same tires. So Maxxis High Road, the standard version in a 28C, and then Maxxis High Road, the standard version in a 28C. Let's have a quick, while we're here, have a bit of a side by side. See, both these look pretty fat. One thing you can really see is the lip of the Rovals compared to the CRWs, a lot more flush. Obviously, old school thinking is that this more flush approach is faster. I'm going to say it's faster at very low yaw angles, but I'm going to say at higher yaw angles, this is faster. Then dealing with all of the aero stuff is the Ghibli at the front. So yeah, if the wind changes direction or the air pressure changes or temperature changes or anything like that, that's going to know about it, and that's what's going to give us our results. I think I'm going to do ABBA testing because I don't want to change the wheels too many times because that eats out of time. Another cool thing when testing, both sets of wheels, 0 brake rub. So yeah, that was a lucky break, I guess, or maybe it's just good design. Yeah, the rotors on both of these fall in exactly the same place, so 0 brake rub, because obviously the slightest bit of brake rub and you'd be messing your results up. We have the Nero skin suit to keep things as slippery as we can. Tried to make myself slippery so that signal to noise ratio is better for the tests. This skin suit is the bomb. So yeah, results up on screen. So for the power, another good thing about using the Ghibli Aero sensor, you don't actually have to keep exactly the same power in each run because the sensor knows how much power you're doing. It can put that into the calculations. But just to keep things as controlled and as spare as I can, I aim for 190 watts on each run. So it's 6 kilometers of testing per run. So 3 kilometers, pause, do a U-turn, come back 3 kilometers. The sensor is recording like every second, so this is hundreds of data points for it to process and get a good model of. So test 1, 2, 3, and 4, I did 190, 190, 190, and then 191 watts. So like I say, the last run did 1 watt too many, but the Ghibli sensor can take that into account. Average speeds, again, even without the Ghibli sensor, if we just looked at the average speeds, you'd have a lot to conclude as well. 35.2, 35.2, 35.5, 35.5. So just looking at the average speeds, it looks like there's basically nothing in it. I have the crosswind angle for each run and the wind speed for each run. Like I say, that's recorded by the Ghibli Aero sensor. And then basically it can plug out your CDA. And as you can see across the 4 runs, the CDA, the variation was very, very small. But I think if we talk about what's used for 40 k's an hour, this is numbers we can kind of like all understand a bit more. So basically this is the Ghibli taking your CDA and working out if you want to do 40 k's an hour, how many watts would it take? And you can see run 1 on the CRWs, 261 watts. Run 2 on the Ravals, 260 watts. Obviously lower watts is better because you're more efficient. Run 3 also on the Ravals, 258 watts. And then the last run on the CRW is 259 watts. So you can see all within 1 or 2 watts of each other. But if we look at the averages, the Ravals are 1 watt quicker. So 259 watts average for the Ravals and 260 watts for the CRWs. So again, limited testing of just 4 runs. If we did more runs, maybe we'd see more patterns, but I think this is fairly conclusive because like I said, the number of data points in each run is huge. We've got 24 kilometers of testing here, which is quite a lot of testing. So just 1 watt in it for the Roval, it is very impressive. We're going to talk about the rim shapes, the rim profiles in a minute to see how they did it, because people might see these numbers and just assume that the CRWs and the Ravals are exactly the same rim shape and that's why they got exactly the same results. No, the rim shapes are pretty different. But this is impressive for the Ravals because like I say, they have more spokes, and in theory more spokes is giving you more drag. And now carbon spokes, they're obviously a bit thicker, a bit wider. Do they give you more drag or less drag? I think Specialized will say carbon spokes give you more drag. That's what they said in the latest release anyway. But the end result is what you can see, just 1 watt in it. And obviously if you're talking about 260 watts, 1 watt at this scale is like 0.5%, less than 0.5%. So yeah, this is well within the errors of the testing. I am aware of that, but we can basically say the 2 wheels aerodynamically have the same performance. So let's talk rim profiles. Obviously the rim profile dictates a lot of things, from what size tires you can use through to the aerodynamics, through to the stability, all of that stuff. Obviously rims are a very important part of the wheel. Let's talk about dimensions first. So both wheels basically have the front wheel of 50 mil deep and the rear wheel of 60 mil deep. Reason for this being the front wheel being slightly shallower is going to give you more stability in the crosswinds. And at the rear wheel, you can go deeper because you're less worried about the stability of the crosswinds, and you may as well just build the wheel to be as fast as you can to get those diminishing returns. Both wheels also feature a fat front wheel and a more narrow rear wheel. And again, main reason for this is just the different conditions both wheels are met with, and the fact that your front wheel steers, so needs stability, and your rear wheel can't steer, so it doesn't really need stability. Also, yaw angles at the back of the bike are usually shallower than yaw angles at the front of the bike, so basically designing it for different things. So the front wheel of the CRWs is 50 mil deep, the Roval's 51 mil deep, so 1 mil, nothing to write home about. External width, the CRW is 34 mil, the Roval's 35 mil, so the Roval's are a little bit fatter than the CRWs. But the inner width, so this is obviously going to affect what tires you can and can't use. The inner width on the Roval's is 21 mil, whereas the inner width on the CRWs is a massive 25 mil. Now, in general, these days, the trend is going for wider internal rim widths, and obviously the CRWs are a newer wheel than the Roval's. The Roval's are a few years old at this point, so this is kind of reflected in that. Moving to the rear wheel, both wheels are 60 mil deep at the rear. Inner width on the two is identical, both are 21 mil. External widths, the CRW is 29 mil, the Roval's 30.7 mil. So yeah, the Roval's a bit fatter at the back, the CRW is a bit skinnier at the back. But one interesting thing to note from all these dimensions is the Roval's, because the Roval's have the same internal rim width at the front and rear despite having different external rim widths. And one way to do that is by varying the length or the width of the hooks. So the hooks that hold your tires on, the Roval's on the rear wheel, they're tiny little hooks, basically 3mm hooks, whereas on the front wheel, they're double that. They're like 6mm hooks. And that gives the wheel like a very visible shoulder. So when you have your tire coming out here, you can see there's a carbon shoulder of the rim next to the tire. On the other hand, the CRWs, the front and rear have like 4mm hooks. So like a kind of more average, moderate hook on the front and the rear. I'm not sure how much either Roval or CRW will like me putting their rim profiles on the internet for everyone to see, but it is what it is. You know, anyone could go out there and buy a set of the wheels and do this themselves, so it's not like I'm leaking inside information. So these are some of the molds I made of the rims. So check out my high techness. I stole some of my daughter's Play-Doh, wrapped it around the rim, left it for the weekend to go hard, and then come on the Monday and hey presto, you've got the rim profile of the wheel and tire. I did it with the tires on at 70 PSI as well, the 28mm tires, because I know that's what most people run on these. And so the interesting thing is going to be the transition from the tire to the rim, because that's going to affect your aero quite a lot, and it's also a place where you can do some tricky things, I guess. So yeah, let's have a quick look. So after I take my molds, I then photograph them on graph paper and then plot them, scan them, and come up with these diagrams. So if we have a look at this, I overlay the two on top of each other. And if we start with the front wheel first, like I say, this is with the Maxxis High Road 28mm at 70 PSI. So the first immediately obvious thing is just the transition between the tire and the rim. And this is one area where the two wheels are very different. So as I said earlier, one thing that Roval do, they go for their wider hooks. Their hooks on the front wheel are 6mm wide, and it really gives you this pronounced like shoulder on the transition from the tire to the rim. If you look at the overlaid CRWs, the red one, you can see the tire and the rim transition happens a lot further outboard, and there's less of an indent. Now, this is really interesting because traditional thinking says you really want to get the transition from tire to rim as smooth as possible, so you're not disturbing the airflow, yada, yada, yada. But it looks like Roval, on purpose, have this huge shoulder here that I guess they're doing it on purpose to trip the air. Again, I am no aerodynamicist, I'm no Hambini, but I'm guessing what's happening is, especially at higher yaw angles, the air on the far side of the rim, when it hits that shoulder, is getting tripped and separated off sooner. And that's because it's getting separated off sooner, it means when the wheel does eventually stall at certain angles, it's going to be a lot less dramatic. And so that's going to do two things for them. I think number one, it's going to increase their crosswind stability. And I'll talk about how the wheels ride later, but this does tie in with that. Like the Rovals are more stable in crosswinds, in my opinion. But number two, I think it's just a clever thing that they're doing to keep the airflow out of the spokes, maybe. Because like I said, the aero performance of these wheels is very impressive, especially considering the number of spokes they have. So maybe that's something to do with these shoulders tripping the air, so it separates from the rim sooner and doesn't get mashed up by the spokes. But again, all this is hearsay. All this is me just thinking out loud. I have no idea. And of course, the other difficult thing about optimizing this is that this profile that we have here only occurs halfway down here, right? So the air coming this way, okay, that gets hit by that pattern. But what about the air coming here? Like the rim profile here is totally different to the rim profile here. The whole thing is going to get stretched out, totally different shape. So you're optimizing your rim profile. You can't just optimize it for this shape because this is only for this part of the wheel. You know, we've got all these parts of the wheel as well. So wheel, rim, and tire aero optimization, I think, is a very complicated thing. But both companies seem to know what they're doing, as we saw by the Aero test, because they're both very fast wheels. Now, if we look at the rim profiles of the rear wheel, you'll see the tire on these two is a lot more evenly overlapped because the internal rim width of the rear wheel of the two wheels is a lot more similar. So you'll see the tire takes basically the same shape. As I said earlier, the Roval's front wheel has a really big hook and a really small hook at the back, whereas the CRWs use kind of like a small-ish, medium-ish hook on the front and back. So on the rear wheel, the Roval hooks are actually smaller than the CRW hooks, and again, we can see that in the overlay here. The CRWs now have this little shoulder going on, which looks more like the front wheel of the Rovals, but not that pronounced. But again, both wheels, not the cleanest transition between tire and rim, but it would seem that a clean transition between tire and rim isn't as important as maybe we thought. As we go further down the rim, again, the Roval gets fatter a lot further down. So the fattest point of both wheels isn't the brake track. They both get the fattest point a bit further down, but the CRWs hit their fattest point like about 10, 15 mil down the rim, whereas the Rovals hit their fattest point like 20, 25 mil down the rim. So yeah, different profile there, and then both rims just taper off towards the end. So yeah, very different profiles to the front wheel, pretty similar to each other. I'd say the rear wheels, it's a lot less of a contrast between the two. But yeah, looking at the rim profiles, the one standout feature is just those shoulders on the front wheel of the Roval. It's definitely intentional, it's definitely doing something, and yeah, all that time in the wind tunnel wasn't spent in vain. Before we go any further, if I can be really cheeky and ask you to subscribe to the channel, this comparison, I put a lot of work, a lot of hours into it, so if you can give me a subscription in return, it's free, doesn't cost you anything, and helps me out, helps the channel out. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Next up, we're moving on to the hubs of the wheels. Obviously, the hub is the literal heart of the wheel set, and if you mess up the hubs, you're not going to have a very good day. The main difference between the hubs, let's say the Rovals, the internals, they're using DT Swiss internals. I believe they're basically the same as the DT180s, which is DT Swiss's top of the line hubs. On the other hand, the CRWs, their hub design is their own in-house design. It borrows heavily from the DT Swiss design of old because that patent has since expired. So the Freehub mechanism, all that stuff, it's basically heavily inspired by the old DT Swiss stuff. But the bicycle hub, as we know it, has been around for decades at this point. There's not much you can do with it in terms of the internals. Everyone's got pretty much the same setup these days. They've all got really big bearings. 6803s and 6903 is going to give you the best rolling resistance you can get, all that stuff. So as far as Freehub bodies go, they both seem to have a wide choice of Freehub bodies. You know, you've got your Shimano style, you've got your XDR style, or your Campagnolo style. The Freehubs, they both come with a 10-degree engagement angle, I believe, which isn't as good as some wheels on the market, but I think for road, 10 degrees is fine. They can both be upgraded if you want more by putting a 54-tooth star ratchet in there, but in my opinion, a 36 is enough. Sound-wise, I'll drop in a couple of Freehub sound checks. They sound pretty similar. The volume of them both is pretty similar. Maybe the DTs, the sound sounds a bit more crisp, but yeah, you guys tell me. Okay, moving on to spokes. Spokes is probably the biggest difference between these two wheel sets. The Rovals are using DT Swiss's Aerolite spokes, which are a steel spoke, whereas the CRWs are using their own in-house made carbon fiber spokes. Now, carbon fiber spokes have been around for a few years now. Lots of the Chinese brands were early to get on the bandwagon. And the main advantages of carbon spokes, like most carbon fiber things, is lighter and stiffer. Again, huge rabbit hole. Is stiffer better? We talked about it a bit before. We won't go there, but we can all agree that lighter is better. Carbon fiber spokes, for the same load applied to the spoke, you'll get less stretch. So whenever you're riding or cornering or braking all of the forces are basically either trying to twist the rim and the hub's resisting, or vice versa. So your spokes are the only thing to resist these forces. Having spokes that stretch less, in theory, is going to give you more direct load transfer. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we can debate for ages. Me personally, I think I like carbon spokes in terms of the acceleration and the more snappy feeling you get from that. But then for braking, I think there is an argument to say that steel spokes stretching a little bit is a nice way to like ease the braking in and stopping the braking from hitting so suddenly. Again, this is more subjective, so we'll put that in a little box and talk about it later maybe. But what is objective is that carbon spokes are lighter, like for like. They've got overall higher tensile strength. In other words, it takes more force to snap one than a steel spoke, and they all stretch less for the same amount of force applied. So that's going in the favor of the CRWs. If we're looking at the front wheel of both wheels, the CRW is using 16 spokes laced 1-to-1, whereas the Rovals are using 18 spokes laced 2-to-1. So we have less spokes on the CRWs on the front wheel, but there are actually more spokes that can transfer braking loads. So on the Rovals, the drive side spokes are all radially laced. Now radially laced spokes, they can help your lateral stiffness, but they can't do anything torsionally. So when you're braking, they basically can't transfer any of that load, which means the Rovals only have 12 spokes that can transfer the braking loads on the front wheel, whereas the CRWs have 16. Now you can debate this and say that only half of those spokes can do it. So we could say the CRWs have 8 spokes and the Rovals have 6 spokes, but no matter which way you look at it, the CRWs have more spokes to transfer that braking force. Again, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? People can debate. I'm just saying objectively, the CRWs have more spokes that can transfer that braking force. So after talking about the wheels that much, I guess we've got to talk about the price, because you guys have to part with your hard-earned money to buy these things. The CRWs, they have an RRP of $1,680 US, so not a cheap wheel by any means. The Rovals, on the other hand, have an RRP of $2,800 US, so a significant amount more than the CRWs, let's say. If my math is right, that makes the Rovals like 65% more expensive than the CRWs, but you are paying for the Roval brand name and extra warranty and stuff, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, let's talk about the warranty. Now you'll have to check this in your own territory because different countries seem to have different warranties for different companies and all this stuff. But in general, I believe in the United States, Roval offer a lifelong warranty to the original owner of the wheels, whereas the CRWs are coming with a 2-year warranty. So definitely a win for Roval on this one. And now both of these warranties that I just talked about are for manufacturing defects. And in general, you're probably going to find manufacturing defects within the first few months. But it is what it is. Roval's is longer because a lifetime is lifetime. In the United States as well, the Rovals come with a 2-year crash replacement warranty. So if you've registered your wheels when you bought them, if you crash within the first 2 years, you have your crash replacement policy. The CRWs have no crash replacement policy, but if you do crash and break something, they will sell you parts to let you fix your wheels. For example, I think a new rim costs like $380 US. So, yeah, it is racing. We do crash, and it's nice to have, a way of getting back on the road. But yeah, check in your country, because I think, for example, here in China, I think Roval don't have a crash replacement policy. So yeah, it will be different by territory. So make sure you do check. Okay, so now it's time to get a bit subjective. I'm going to talk about the ride feeling of those wheels, because you can put them in the lab, you can do the tests, you can do aero testing, all this stuff, and look at the numbers, but at the end of the day, like how the wheels feel to ride is going to be a big part of it. Both wheels are great to ride, so straight off the bat, you've seen my wheel collection. I've ridden a lot of wheels. Both of these wheels are definitely within the top 5 wheel sets I've ridden before. Both very, very, very good wheels, but very different as well. So I'd say for the CRWs, the main point is just the weight or the lack of weight. So especially when you're setting off from a red light and all this stuff, just the way that the wheels accelerate, the bike accelerates, it's generally not like anything else. Being that much lighter than the other wheels is noticeable. And yeah, it's a nice thing to have on the bike. It's a great feeling, obviously. The second point of the CRWs in their favor, I'd say, is the carbon spokes. So I've been on carbon spokes now for like 3 or 4 years. I've been raving on about them on the channel for 3 or 4 years because, yeah, for my riding style, punchy climbs, short accelerations, all this stuff, I love carbon spokes. It's hard to go back to steel spokes after riding carbon spokes. So yeah, I love that about the CRWs. On the other hand, the Rovals, one thing I'll say about the Rovals is they handle really nicely. So both descending, twisty roads and also crosswind stability, the Rovals are in a league of their own. And like I said, I've tested a lot of wheels. I'm not just comparing them to the CWs, I'm comparing them to everything. The Rovals in a crosswind are super stable. Again, this will depend on your own tires, your pressures, and what bike you've got them on even. But for me, on my bike, at my weight, with my tires and my pressures and all this stuff, the Rovals, the stability is crazy. Like just today I was riding out in a storm, the wind was blowing crazy, and the Rovals going down the descent, they just felt so stable. Again, I think it's that shoulder on the tire rim transition that's tripping the air intentionally, so therefore it's not as affected by changing conditions, but I'm just theorizing at this point. But I'm splitting hairs at this point. Both wheels are amazing wheels. Like I said, both within my top 5. If I had to sum it up, I'd say that I'd want the CRWs for the climbs and I'd want the Rovals for the descents. That would be like my dream scenario, right? The Rovals just feel so planted on corners as well. Like if you're going around a corner and you've already committed to it and then there's like a crack in the road or some stones in the road, and you know, on a normal wheel set, those cracks and stuff, like they'll upset the bike, and you feel the bike wanting to understeer a bit or whatever. On the Rovals, it's just planted. Like doesn't matter what the road surface is, it just seems to just stick to it. So yeah, don't know how it is. I don't know if it's because of that lateral stiffness or what, but yeah, the Rovals hold a corner very well. Okay, so let's try and summarize. So again, this summary is subjective because how important I think something is, you may disagree. The weights of the wheels, for example, we know the weights in grams, but what is that out of 10? That's going to be subjective. So take these with a grain of salt because these are my subjective opinions, but let's go through them one at a time. So acceleration of the two wheels. The Rovals, I'm giving them a 7 out of 10, and the CRWs, I'm giving them a 9 out of 10. And 2 reasons for this. Number 1, carbon spokes. Like I said, for me, the feeling of acceleration is more direct. Again, I didn't do any torsional stiffness testing, so it is what it is. But one thing that we can be sure of is less weight will accelerate faster. That's basic physics. And so the CRWs definitely have that. So they get 9 out of 10, and the Rovals get 7 out of 10. Why not 10 out of 10? Because obviously, I think if we had wheels that were lighter still, then we can get a 10 out of 10. So a 9 and a 7 for now, I think are fair scores. Next up is climbing. Again, climbing, do you mean like 25% crazy steep, or do you just mean like 2% false flats? For me, climbing is usually between like 5 and 10% gradients. So aero is still a thing, but weight is king, right? So in that situation, in the aero testing, we've seen the aero performance of both wheels is basically the same anyway, but the CRWs have the weight advantage. So for climbing, I'm giving the CRWs 10 out of 10. Like of all the wheels I've tested, there's no wheel that climbs better on like a 5% gradient. If it's like a 20% gradient, then okay, maybe lighter, shallower wheels will be better. But for all-round climbing, 5-10% gradients, the CRWs are king, 10 out of 10. But the Rovals are definitely not bad wheels. Like they get 8 out of 10. Like they still climb amazing. The next one, handling. Like I said, both wheels ride great. Both are in my top 5. But I do have to give the edge to the Rovals. As I said earlier, they just seem to be able to track a corner and hold their line better than the CRWs do. I'm not sure why. So Rovals, 10 out of 10, the best handling wheels I think I've ridden. And the CRWs, like I said, they're good too. They get a 9 out of 10. There's very little in it, like only riding them back to back can you really tell, but the Rovals do have the edge. Next category, aero speed. As I said, we did the aero testing with the Ghibli and both came out to the same within 0.5% within margin of error of the testing. So for that, both wheels get 10 out of 10. They're super fast. If we're going to be cliche, we'll say that they both hold the speed really well. But yeah, super fast wheels, 10 out of 10 for both. Next category, aero stability. Again, don't have a test rig for this, so you're just going based on my feelings. It's almost impossible to do a fair comparison because the wind changes every day, yada, yada, yada. But I've got lots of miles on both wheel set now, and in my opinion, the Rovals are more stable than the CRWs. Now, it might not be an aero thing entirely. Because the Rovals are heavier, you get more of a gyroscopic effect. So the wheel wants to stay straight more than the CRWs because it's lighter. It has less gyroscopic effect, which means it's going to be easier for the same amount of wind, the same force is going to upset the CRWs more than the Rovals. That's just physics. You can't cheat it. But for this reason, the Rovals get a 10 out of 10. The CRWs get a 9 out of 10. I'm a 50 kilo, 53 kilo rider. This is Xiamen, one of the windiest cities in China, and I can ride them every day. There's not been a ride where either wheel, I've said, oh no, it's too windy for this wheel today. So both wheels are already super stable, thus the high scores for both, but the Roval's that little bit more stable, so 1 point extra. Next category, warranty. So Rovals, again, this is going to depend which country you're in, so this is a hard one to score, but I'm going to give the Rovals a 9 out of 10, assuming you're in America. Most people watching this are in America, according to my stats. And the CRWs, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10, because like I said, the warranty on the Rovals is a lifetime warranty, whereas on the CRWs, it's just a 2-year warranty. Are you going to encounter all the problems within the first 2 years? I don't know, but yeah, Rovals 9, CRWs 7. Last category is the value. So again, this is subjective because if you're a millionaire, you don't care about the difference in price, but most of us aren't millionaires. For value, the Rovals, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. Obviously with Specialized, when you buy something, some of your money is going towards the marketing to pay the, pro team salaries, all this stuff. Most of the money is going to the R&D and stuff as well. So, 7 out of 10 is still a good score. If you're comparing this to a lightweight or something, one of those, coffee shop rider wheels, the value here is not bad, 7 out of 10. But the CRWs, I think, have to take it for value, right? Like, there's like a 60% difference in price between the two. The performance is essentially the same, or the performance is better on the CRWs. So yeah, you got to give the CRWs 9 out of 10 for value. That gives the final scores for both wheels, as the Rovals get 61 out of 70, a very high score, but the CRWs get 63 out of 70 as well. If you take off the value scores, so if money is no object, then they both get the same score. But if money really is no object, then maybe you don't care about the warranty either. So you take off the warranty scores, and then the CRWs are back in the lead again. So whatever. Both wheels, very, very, very good wheels. I don't think you'd regret owning either wheel. But on my scoring system, the edge does go to the CRWs, mostly because of the value proposition. You don't have to take my word for everything. Obviously, especially the Rovals, they've sold tens of thousands of these, I guess. And so, it's pretty easy to find someone who has a pair, ask their opinion and stuff. The CRWs, they've only been really selling for about a year now, so there's less people out there riding them. But on Weight Wieners, there's a 65-page thread of people talking about the CRWs, so plenty of people talking about them there. But both websites, the Specialized website and Pandapodium, both have customer reviews. So at the time of writing the article, the time of recording this, on the Specialized website, the Roval Rapide CLX 2s have 7 reviews with an average score of 4.3 out of 5. And on pandapodium.cc, the CRWs have 11 reviews with an average of 4.5 out of 5. So 4.3, 4.5, pretty similar. Again, with these customer reviews online, take them with a pinch of salt, because the people who had bad experiences are more likely to write in a review than the people who had good experiences. So both of these probably have some negative bias to them, but both are good reviews. Go do your research. So which wheel set should you buy? Which wheel set should you part your hard-earned cash with? I'm actually not going to give an opinion, because I think you guys are clever. If you've watched the video this far, you should know yourself. You should be able to make up your own mind. If with this much information in front of you, you don't know which one to buy, then I can't help you. And maybe ask your friends or get into it in the comments section down below. I don't want to influence anyone's decision. They are both really, really good wheels. Like I say, they're very similar, but also very different. I love them both. So I'm not going to say which wheel set you should buy, but for me personally, if it was my cash, I'd go with the CRWs. Number one, The money is probably the big thing, but number two for me, it's the carbon spokes. I'm a big sucker for carbon spokes. You know, look at my videos on my channel for the past few years, you'll see me raving about carbon spokes. And I'm a weight weenie. You guys know I'm a weight weenie, and 200 grams off a bike, you know, you're going from a 7 kilo bike to a 6.8 kilo bike. And yeah, it doesn't sound like much, but for a weight weenie, that is pretty huge. So you guys let me know in the comments down below which one you'd buy. And yeah, I'm interested to get into it in the comments with you down below. Okay, now for this section, I want to be like full transparent and do all the disclaimers in the background and yada, yada, yada. So the first thing is I am not an engineer, you know, I'm using Play-Doh. I'm not sure many engineers are using Play-Doh, or maybe they should. Everything I did, I tried to control as well as I could. Been trying to open with my methods as well, so you guys can criticize and judge for yourself, which again, I'm looking forward to getting into in the comments down below. So everything, all of my results take with a pinch of salt. They are just that, my results, don't take them as fact. The second thing is obviously bias. So my website is literally selling the Rovals. My website is literally selling the CRW wheels. Again, I'd like to preface that is that I sell the CRW wheels because I think they're good wheels. If I could sell the Rovals, I'd sell the Rovals too, because I think they're great wheels too. But literally, I have a monetary incentive to convince you to buy the CRWs. So take that with a pinch of salt. Obviously, if I had some ulterior motive to sell these and mind wash you, then I wouldn't be telling you. So I do believe in full transparency. Also, personal biases. I'm friends with several specialized employees, both in China and in America, and specialized dealers, yada, yada, yada. I'm also friends with the CRW staff too. So am I going to sit here and talk trash about either company when I know next week I'm going to be riding bikes with people from Specialized and I'm going to be riding bikes with people from CRW? Again, you guys tell me. In my experience, both these companies, they appreciate the feedback, and they'll probably get a kick out of this video as much as anyone. And yeah, I look forward to talking about this video with them next time on the ride with them. I've been to both companies' headquarters as well. I've seen things in both companies' headquarters I'm not allowed to talk about. I've signed NDAs with them, but everything contained in this video is you know, public knowledge, public domain. You know, I didn't steal the rim profiles from any of their servers or anything. Like, I literally put Play-Doh on the rims and got it myself, which is something anyone could do. So yeah, nothing in this video that violates any NDAs or anything. Another bonus section of the video has to be reserved for the Roval Rapide CLX Team Edition. Yay! So as I was putting the finishing touches on this article and this script, Roval launched the Team Edition of this wheel. Very, very frustrating for me because I've spent dozens of hours at this point testing both wheels, and then Roval brings out a new version. But the new version, the team version, isn't a replacement for the twos. It's like to coincide with the twos. But let's get into it. So many people, myself included, were expecting the Team Edition to have carbon spokes. The Team Edition doesn't have carbon spokes. It still has steel spokes, but now it has the updated DT Swiss Aerolite 2, which are a more aero spoke. The wheels, the Team Edition, are more expensive. They're now $3,500 US as opposed to $2,800. So almost double the price of the CRWs now, but they do come with free tires and some water bottles and something. I forget, check the website for the full details. But the main performance increase is the weight. So they went on a diet, and I think they got like 130 grams lighter. So they're still 70 grams heavier than the CRWs, which is not insignificant, but they're a lot closer than the regular versions. So I'm super interested in what that would do for performance. Super interested in what that did to stiffness as well. I imagine they're not as stiff as the old ones, but only Specialized know until I get my hands on one and test them too. They say the rim profiles are unchanged, but they say the new wheels are faster in the wind tunnel. Personally, I'm guessing it's because they upgraded to the DT Aerolite 2 version of the spoke. I think that's where the gains are coming from, because the hubs no longer have their aero flange. The hubs don't look as aero as the old hubs, but it's hard to look aero these days. You can't, you know, your eyes are not a wind tunnel. My personal guess, my theory is that the new hubs are aerodynamically slower by a little bit, but the new spokes are aerodynamically faster and leading to the wheels being faster overall. Again, I'd love to get my hands on a pair and do the testing with the Ghibli again, so we shall see. If Roval or Chris Wehan are watching this, I'd love to put them through the paces, so feel free to send me a pair. Ding! Yeah, maybe? Yeah. No? Okay. But yeah, this wheel coming out, I guess you could say it kind of nulls the title of the video, because this video was the best Western wheels, and now Roval have brought out a better version of the wheels. Huh. Okay, that was a monster video. A lot of work went into the testing and the comparison and all that stuff. So if you guys could give this video a like, I would appreciate it. Also, send this video to any wheel nerds that you know. I'd love to have more people seeing this video, have some more feedback and more discussion going on in the comments. If you want more comparison videos like this, let me know as well. I actually have a spreadsheet with most of the information for this video in that spreadsheet, but it also has the information of like 20 other wheel sets as well. So if I get enough likes, comments, and all that love, maybe I'll do more videos like this comparing wheel sets or going through that database. It would be interesting to show you which wheels are the lightest wheels, which wheels are the stiffest wheels, and all that stuff too. So yeah, let me know if you'd be interested in a video like that. In the video description down below, I'll have a link to the article if you prefer to read the article or you want to go look at the rim profile pictures there and stuff like that. I'll also have a link to the Specialized website where you can buy the Specialized wheels and a link to Panda Podium where you can buy the CRWs. Like I said, I think buying either wheel, you wouldn't regret it. So, you know, go do your research and buy whichever one you want. Anyway, I'm exhausted. I have a sore throat from talking about these wheels for so much. So the only thing left to do is say, China cycling out.